Hello, we're back. It's actually going to come out before the podcast this week. Don't be surprised, it's coming. But there was some breaking news this week that happened just today, and the podcast this week is different. We're not talking about the news, so we're going to do a special little news segment with the people that were interested in talking about this. So let's get the minor stuff out of the way. There are two little updates to some old news things. One, Activision Blizzard's deal with Microsoft to be bought out has been approved by the Activision Blizzard stockholders. Seems like it's going to go through. That's the general update for that. The next thing, there was a little kerfuffle that happened with Yuji Naka this past week.
Yes.
Over Balan Wonderworld and Square Enix. For anyone who hasn't been informed about this is Yuji Naka is the original, one of the original Sonic creators. Worked on Balan Wonderworld as its lead for a while, and we have just learned that he was removed as a developer on Balan Wonderworld about 6 months before the game launched. And he started a lawsuit.
Good for him.
To be put back on it. And this is a thing that happened before. It's not currently undergoing. And what he was stating essentially is that Balan Wonderworld was not close to being finished.
Obviously,
when he was removed. Yeah. So he was wanting to take responsibility as the way that of course we don't know how much of this is correct information, how much of this was just withheld from people. Because from Yuji Naka's statements, it sounds like he wanted to take responsibility for the unfinished work that was happening and try to do what he could to make the game better. At the same time, he was the head of this game for a good while. So in the state that it's in, that would have been a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's just I think it was a combination of things that happened that made Balan Wonderworld real bad. But essentially what he says is that he wanted to strive to make it a good game until the end and wanted fans to enjoy it when they bought it. And stating that the tight schedule of Wonderworld's development was set by Square Enix's producer and not the development team. So, if so, I'm curious how that's going to play into what has just happened.
Yeah, man, that makes Square Enix look really bad. I sure am glad that there isn't something else that happened that makes them look possibly even worse. Wow.
Hey, this is going to be interesting because two other Square Enix updates. One's the big one, one's a very small one. The small one, Final Fantasy 16 is apparently very close to finished.
Yes.
So, possibility we see it late this year, early next year. I'm expecting a summer blowout for this. So, I think that's something to look forward to from Square Enix.
Either a good way or a bad way.
Probably in a good way, because that's their Japanese studio. AKA their only studios.
But
because Square Enix has just agreed to sell Eidos Montreal, Square Enix Montreal, and Crystal Dynamics to Embracer Group. Now, a lot of game players probably don't know what Embracer Group is, because it's not a name that gets thrown around a lot like EA, like Activision. But they are essentially the same type of thing, where they are a large group that owns a lot of different companies and pays development for them. General list of Embracer Group's stuff. They own a lot of indie developers. They own THQ Nordic now. Now they own Eidos Montreal, Crystal Dynamics, and Square Enix Montreal as well. So they're a much bigger studio than I think a lot of people expect. They own a Spear. And a Spear
also own a Gearbox.
Yeah, Gearbox. A Spear, if you didn't know, is the company currently doing the KOTOR remake. So Embracer Group is not like a small dog in terms of games, but they're one that I think a lot of people aren't super familiar with because they don't throw their name around very much.
They stay in the background, yeah.
Yeah, they stay in the back. And I'll give kind of a look into Embracer Group's statement they have on their website, because I think it's an interesting look at how they operate. So essentially, they are a group, a parent company of businesses developing and publishing PC, console, mobile, and board games and other related media. The main thing that Embracer Group has going for them compared to something like Square Enix for a lot of these studios that just got bought is they are much more hands-off. Embracer Group is a very let the companies that we own do what they're doing, and then we're just going to kind of be there as the funding and obviously like taking some of the profit to keep operating and whatnot. But
which is probably
novel
why you don't hear
idea.
about them as
What
much.
What a novel concept.
But there's not a lot of stories of like Embracer Group canceling games. There's not a lot of stories of Embracer Group like cutting funding for projects. They're a type of group that has really flown under the radar when it comes to these acquisitions, and yet they own, like, I think it was close to 25-ish% of a lot of global game studios that are in that like big discussion about what studios might get bought. They own Gearbox's movie division, Gearbox Publishing, as well. So
that's a funny joke.
They own Perfect World. They own Deep Silver. They own Flying Wild Hog, who does Shadow Warrior. They owned. Let me make sure I get the name right of this studio.
So it seems
Demiurge,
like
just a lot of
it
small
seems like
stuff.
they've kind of placed themselves in that kind of like upper end of like AA type of projects.
Yeah,
Is
because
like
we'll
where
hear
they've-
you hear a lot about Saber Interactive and Koch Media. Those are both subdivisions of Embracer Group,
Oh, okay.
along with THQ Nordic. So whenever you hear those are also Embracer Group studios. But they have games of all genres. They own Piranha Bytes, group that makes Elex and Risen. So they are not fond of closing studios, or else I think Piranha Bytes would have been gone a long time ago,
Probably,
unfortunately. Which I have to say makes me a little bit happy about this acquisition.
Yeah.
Because I think we might see a new Thief game. We might see a new Deus Ex. Because the sale agreement that happened was not just the studios, it was also the IPs.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a split here. The Square Enix properties that were kind of split, the ones going to Embracer Group are Tomb Raider. That's like the big money one. Deus Ex, Thief, Legacy of Kain, and they also list others, that there are others being transferred, but those details are not public right now. We do know they are keeping Life is Strange, they're keeping Just Cause, and they're keeping Outriders. So the European division of Square Enix is still intact. It seems like the American side of things has been mostly American and Canadian side has been slashed out of this. So yeah, I'm curious as to what this is. Now, I'm sure you two are going, oh, this has to have been a big money deal. You got Tomb Raider, you got Deus Ex, you got Crystal Dynamics, you got Eidos Montreal just made Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the best-selling games recently, that Square Enix still marked as a failure.
One of the better games that came out that year, to be honest.
$300 million.
It's high up there for me.
$300 million.
It's like the big company equivalent of like $5.
That's what one video game release of a AAA company will make.
They got these 3 sub companies on a Steam sale for like over half off, probably what they could and should have been worth.
Yeah. And this transfer is just expected to go through in July, between July and September, which is the like completion date, because this is a smaller amount of money than most of the other studio acquisitions we've seen. Yeah, I think this is mind-boggling to me that Square Enix let these companies go for that little.
I'm in my head right now picturing Embracer Group. They're like figuring out this deal, and then they settle on that price, and they're like,
because Embracer Group has a lot of money. Embracer Group is not a small fish. They are a big dog.
Right.
But Ryan.
Yep.
Why would Square Enix sell some of their companies that have such potential for such little money? What could possibly be their motive?
Why don't we scroll down to the section that is about the purpose of this transaction? Section 1.
Folks.
The transaction will assist the company, in this term Square Enix, in adapting to the changes underway in the global business environment by establishing a more efficient allocation of resources, which will enhance corporate value by accelerating growth in the company's core businesses in the digital entertainment domain. In addition, the transaction enables the launch of new businesses by moving forward with investments in fields including blockchain, AI, and the cloud. This move is based on the policy of business structure optimization that the company set forth under the medium-term business strategy unveiled on May 13th, 2021. So they go on to say they're aligning their publishing groups overseas, which is essentially European and Japanese. They're going to be the main focus of Square Enix going forward. This is very strange because we have Square Enix's owner on record saying that he's interested in NFTs and blockchain in games. We also have on record a bunch of Final Fantasy producers saying they don't want that. Mm-hmm. We know 14 has had statements from Yoshi P saying it will never have NFTs. We've gotten statements from other Square Enix developers saying they don't like it, and it was just like a misunderstanding, mistranslation. Square Enix is going to try something with NFTs. I don't know what to make of this as of right now.
We also have on record that when any big game company has tried something with NFTs,
yes,
it is ruinous for them. Like, stocks go down, people make fun of them so hard, and whatever project that they try to put them in almost like doesn't even get off the ground. It gets shoved into the ground.
Here's my challenge for you two and anyone watching this. Try and name one good NFT venture in the realm of the games industry. You can't.
I mean, nothing's popular enough.
You can't.
So I want to bring up a few other things about Japanese publishing studios right now, because there is a sequence of big Japanese developers taking these risks and it not paying off in the past. Mm-hmm. Capcom spent a bunch of money that they had gotten from the Monster Hunter 3DS sales trying to invest in a mobile games division that has not had a return on their investment and essentially wasted the profits of like 2 Monster Hunter games. Level 5. So I'm sure, Brett, you've heard of Level 5, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
They made tons of JRPGs and like indie Japanese games that people loved. And they were just started chasing weird mobile trends and whatnot, and have kind of vanished off the face of the earth and lost all their seal of quality. So, man, this to me is not an indication of this going to end well. I think I can imagine a world in which some Japanese games, with their mindset of like, in Japan, gacha has taken off really well. They have a lot of gacha things, just like gachapon existing as a thing that you can physically go do in Japan, where you just like put your coins in and get a little toy, and that being super popular even among adults, I think is some indication that maybe part of this is a like culture barrier, and in Japan this idea might be going over better than it does here. But man, I am very cautiously like looking to what Square Enix's reception is going to be abroad when they release a game that involves NFTs. Like, can you imagine if Valkyria Elysium has NFTs?
Don't even say it.
As a main concept, dead on arrival.
Literally dead on arrival.
As a huge Final Fantasy 14 fan, how would you feel? Some update.
It's not going to happen.
No, but I'm just saying. Let's put up a hypothetical.
Yeah.
What would happen if that were to happen?
What would happen?
How would you feel?
So, Final Fantasy 14 exists as it does because of the trust between the player base and the developers of that game.
Right.
NFTs instantly will destroy that.
Yeah.
And Final Fantasy 14 will cease to exist. That is what will happen. Because I think the sole reason 14 has become such a like mainstay in the MMO world is because of the transparency that the development team has with everything they do. And they're on record stating that NFTs are not a thing that is coming to 14. If NFTs then came to 14 as anything except like this weird thing that is not in the game at all, right? If it's not in the game whatsoever, I could see it being a thing that maybe gets a pass. But if it's in the game in any form, if I can open my game window and see anywhere that there's an NFT available for purchase, out. I'm out.
If the letters NFT are right next to each other when you boot up that game.
Because I also ask myself, like, why am I okay with 14 having a cash shop more so than other games that have a cash shop? It's because 14, you can't access it in the game. You have to go to like a separate website with a separate login process to even see the cash shop. You can't even, there is no mention of it in the game. You don't have the ability to look at anything in the game that you can buy for real money, and I think that is really where this change comes in. Of it doesn't feel like the game has it. You can just ignore it and never have any different experience of playing the game. So I think that's like the important separation there, which will not exist if NFTs become a mainline thing. Like, imagine Final Fantasy 17 comes out and is just like a multiplayer NFT trading card game or something.
Oh, God.
Death of the franchise for real this time. Like, oh my god.
Square Enix has kind of been eroding a lot of the faith that people have had in them for a long time, and I think this would be a nail in the coffin.
Yeah, for sure. And I think eroding away the faith that people had in them is a really good way of saying it, because like multiple times, like 13 comes out and a lot of people don't like it. 15 comes out, even more people don't like it. Like just a lot of bad decisions of like more recent like Deus Ex games, people not liking them, like a lot of things that.
Well, it's not that
Square Enix,
people loved the most recent Deus Ex game, but it was the middle part of a trilogy and ended on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Just a lot of like things that now compared to this are I'm willing to say like little things, because it's that like a lot of things that add up to people like losing faith over time. Like still you have like Ryan and I still super pumped for 16 because it seems like it's in really good hands with Yoshi P, who's producing
Creative
and
Business
developing
Unit
and stuff.
3 making that.
Exactly, yeah.
Very excited.
You know, when Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 comes out within the next 20 years, that's going to be, you know, I'm pretty faithful. That's at least going to be, like, cool or interesting. But, like, Chocobo GP, Babylon's,
and, like, I imagine Chocobo GP
Avengers.
might have been okay if it released as free-to-play. But the fact that it was $50 with a battle pass that you could buy, with all this other stuff that is just very mobile game UI design.
Yeah. It's
not so
like
good.
what I'm leading up to saying is that in human history, people thought when they lived in the Roman Empire was going to last forever. That's been gone for like thousands of years now. And you know what? As many times as Square Enix has made a bad decision,
Yeah.
when have they ever actually learned from it? Okay, the Avengers came out, that like people like the story mode in parts, people like parts of the gameplay, but that live service is absolutely terrible. They won't do that again, right? Oh man,
We have no indication.
They just keep making the same mistakes over and over again, and then you know the thing that I'm pretty sure in our Games Club episode for Guardians of the Galaxy, we were like, oh, this must be the result of the learning experience of Avengers doing really bad. Guardians
Clearly
of the
not,
Galaxy.
because they just sold the studio that made that.
Exactly, yeah. This must be them going like, oh, well, the multiplayer, our handling of multiplayer superhero things in the Marvel Universe is bad. Let's do a single player thing. And yeah, clearly not, because they just got rid of them. So I don't know why they have a death wish, but it really feels like they do. And
this is why I honestly feel that this is going to be in the long run a better place, if not for these studios to be, at least for these IPs to be.
For the properties, yeah, for sure.
Because THQ Nordic was dead in the water. Like, completely, THQ was going under. There was no hope of their studios being revived. Bought out, and now we have a new Darksiders. We've had like 2 new Darksiders games because THQ Nordic was got by Embracer Group. So I think there is like some really genuine availability for these franchises to return here. Especially, I think Thief is due for it. Thief to me is the one that like stands out as, it's not the most obvious thing, but I think there is such a missing gap in current games for a
Well,
Thief experience.
and Deus Ex fans needs that, needs that final chapter.
Yeah, I do
Yeah,
think the
still
question mark
does.
with Deus Ex is, do they make Mankind Divided sequel, or do they take Deus Ex and make like a proper Deus Ex 3 or Deus Ex 2, I guess it would be, from the old school Deus Ex games? Because I do wonder if the cost of making Mankind Divided 2 would kind of be a prohibitive thing, because like Mankind Divided was a very expensive game. That was a game that cost way more than it should have to make. And another game that Square Enix tried to do like microtransactions in that
Yeah.
didn't work at all.
Well, they had this whole like convoluted like um uh oh my god. I'm sorry. I had a whole train of thought and then it just completely derailed. They had
Left the
this
station.
entire I'm sorry about that. They had this entire like convoluted pre-order system where it's like if
Yeah, that's the meme.
this certain
yeah.
amount of people pre-order, you get this reward for like a pre-order reward. If this amount of people do it, you get this reward, which is
And what
just
something that'll make you interested. Embracer Group owns Deep Rock Galactic.
yes, they do.
They are responsible for Deep Rock Galactic. They're responsible for a Coffee Stain, which does Satisfactory and made, I believe, I want to say Goat Simulator. Yep, also Goat Simulator. So they are a fan of indies. And
Well,
Valheim is
they're a
technically
fan
under
of-
them as well.
They're a fan of everything, right? They just got these giant, like, well-known franchises as well. So they're covering their bases. It seems like.
And like they funded Shadow Warrior 3. I think there is a lot of leeway here for us to see some things that maybe we wouldn't otherwise see.
Yeah.
So I'm cautiously optimistic that we're gonna get a proper thing out of this at some point.
I can't help but go to crazy person places with this because this is just such a crazy thing.
300 million, like
Exactly. I keep going back to that number and I keep going like that sounds to me like we can't get what we want out of these studios because we're misusing them and don't know how to let them develop games.
yeah.
We I just an invasive thought. We can't get any good things out of this professional wrestler, so we're gonna send him back to wrestling school and then mysteriously fire him and 30 other people from the company every single like 3 months for a couple years in a row.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm referencing WWE. And the thing with them is that for a while now, people have kind of caught on that with WWE, it's like, all right, they're trimming all the fat because they're probably setting up to be bought by someone.
Yep.
They're getting rid of anything, whether it's actually a weak link or whether it's just like man who's above Vince McMahon just only sees green. And if he doesn't see green in Keith Lee gets to go to AEW and have the time of his life. Sure, whatever. But he's not making me money, so I don't care. I'm wondering, this isn't a pipe dream, this is a pipe nightmare. If Square Enix is just like, well, I mean, the thing with Japanese companies is that most of the time, whether it's like a law or whatever or not, only Japanese companies buy them if they're going to absorb them into their bigger thing. We've talked about this before, where
Yeah.
Square Enix and Sony own like worldwide things, but they're still like Japan based. So there's not really a lot of Western big things that have Japanese places of operations at all. I wonder if our nightmare is coming true, Ryan, and this is all just step one of Square Enix relinquishing all of their worldly possessions to be bought by Sony. And they're just trimming all the fat to make themselves ripe for the purchasing. Because why else would you just like make a decision that, quite frankly, we're no more beating around the bush. It's just kind of stupid. I don't know why you would just give away like a couple good devs for just literally like no money.
Yeah.
Other than like you need to get
there is
rid
the
of them
point
fast.
that you mentioned earlier of Square Enix has always kind of treated these Western studios as second hat to the rest of what's going on with Square Enix, because
Which is
everything they've released has been marked as a failure, right? And Guardians of the Galaxy sold super well, did
It is a good
incredibly well.
game, too.
Outriders is their mark of success compared to Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm like, what was the difference there?
It just doesn't make
I'm sure they
sense at all.
sold. I'm sure in some world, Outriders has to have sold less than Guardians, right? Like,
like-
absolutely, it has to have.
the weird thing too is that I feel like the developers, the ones that got rid of, are the ones that are the least problematic in terms of releasing games that absolutely bomb, or ones that are, hated by the fan base, right? Because like again, even if Guardians of the Galaxy, okay, maybe didn't sell to, Square Enix's completely unrealistic expectations, it still sold well and was received really, really well. Tomb Raider, an entire franchise of games that for the most part is like a solid, well-made franchise. People had some issues with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and that may have been because it, switched developers. But no one would call Shadow of the Tomb Raider a bad game, right? You have a whole trilogy of games that, for the most part, completely unproblematic, and that's the developer you get rid of. You had 2 Deus Ex games that went over really, really well. That's the developer you get rid of. What are you doing? Why are those the ones you're getting rid of? Those seem to be the ones that are the least, like, okay, maybe they're not living up to your expectations, but it's not like they're not pulling in any money.
mm-hmm. I do wonder if maybe they just kind of accepted that these studios are never going to be what Square Enix wants them to be. And so they were just like, okay, we're going to basically give them to a studio that will likely, or a publishing group that will likely know how to handle them better. I wonder if that is something that played into this, because they're just like, we don't want to have to deal with paying accountants and all of this like executive stuff for these groups if we're just like not enjoying what they're producing, which is a silly thing to say, right? Like, Tomb Raider franchise has sold incredibly well. Even if like Shadow didn't do super well, the rest of the games did. Deus Ex has always been like a high performer, but never to the expectations that Square Enix sets.
But how much of that, like in something like Deus Ex, right? I feel like part of the reason Mankind Divided didn't do quite as well as it could have was because of that crazy pre-order, system that they had. It just seems like these aren't the studios that you want, but when you try and make them the studios that you want, that's where the issue comes in. If you just left them alone, let them do their thing, they'd probably be pulling in more numbers. I swear, I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy would have done so much better if Avengers hadn't put this awful, sour taste in everyone's mouth.
For sure.
Yeah, because I think they definitely lost a lot of pre-orders.
Yeah, because a lot of people looked at Guardians of the Galaxy like, oh, this looks kind of similar. Like, the characters kind of look like their MCU counterparts, sort of. It's another it's Marvel property, third-person thing. No, I don't want more of this Avengers garbage. And it wasn't anything like that.
Yeah, and we don't have sales numbers for Guardians of the Galaxy, which is extremely strange. Because they keep reporting it as having not met their expectation. I'm just like, what was your expectation? Yeah. And what did it actually do?
Clearly.
Because we know Final Fantasy VII Remake did $3.5 million in like the launch weekend, which is a number that's insane. That is like a game selling the best of anything in a really long time. Like, unless you go back to old Halo games at release and whatnot, you don't find sales like that. And so I have to wonder if like they kept expecting everything to be that and just didn't accept that there's like 20 years of build to Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Even back to when they were just SquareSoft, it keeps going back to Final Fantasy VII because like they were just but one Final Fantasy 1 was like, all right, this is going to be our last game because we're just a failure and we just kind of made a bunch of things people don't really like all that much. So Sakaguchi is gonna go put the gaming hat away and go do something else. And then, oh man, it's pretty good. Just a couple other like, oh, we're experimenting, we're adding new stuff. 6 comes out. Wow, how can a game get better than Final Fantasy 6? This is great.
Yeah.
7 comes out.
Boom.
It's bomb, absolute insanity. Just the gaming world is shattered for all of eternity, and Square Enix just goes, okay, let's do the same thing again. And if you want to change a couple things, go right ahead. They got Nomura on the art, they got the sci-fi setting. Then what could possibly go wrong? Final Fantasy VIII comes out. What is this? I'm sucking magic from enemies and shit. This, what is going on? And now I'm on the moon. Get out of here! Ah! And people got scared. They don't like it anymore. And Square Enix goes, why? Isn't this selling as much as Final Fantasy VII? Every other, why isn't Xenogears selling as much as Final Fantasy VII? It has our name on it. It should be selling as much as Final Fantasy VII. Why? And they have like a temper tantrum, and they have to, okay, Xenogears, get out of here. Final Fantasy, go back to original Fantasy. Get at it. Screw you. And they just start kicking people out. Of, we're gonna make Final Fantasy Spirits Within. What could possibly go wrong when we make Final Fantasy Spirits Within? This is they're like at their midlife crisis, where just like the hairline's like all the way back here. I just got to buy a convertible, it just looks like a really nice car. I just need that convertible. My kids aren't around anymore. Final Fantasy VII isn't around anymore. We're just gonna make a movie with a girl that isn't real, and you're just gonna CGI everything. It's fine. And they destroy themselves over the success of Final Fantasy VII, comparatively, because they always go, this is the upper echelon. Not because, is it a great game? Is it and Remake both great games? Yeah, sure. They're very good in their own ways, related, like even like separate from each other. They're just very fun games, very good music, cool and weird story, a lot of things people hadn't seen before at the time. And you have that crazy advertising push for, honestly, both of them, just in different ways, because Remake has the capability to like look back on the original. You have all these things building up into why it's a good success. No one ever should expect that that's going to happen for every single release, especially when you're a company like Square Enix and you just, like, for lack of a better term, just fart out 80 different titles every single year, whether in a good way or a bad way, to just see what sticks. And some of the things that stick are like good, but then some of the things that stick are good and are like Xenogears, and it sells really well, but not as much as Final Fantasy VII.
No.
So it gets cut. No more sequel. We're gonna make Spirits Within instead. And then what happens, which is where the long game that I'm leading to, is Xenogears, man. He's fed up. He's gonna leave the company. And he's gonna go make Xenoblade instead. And he's gonna have success on his own with Nintendo. Oh, you're gonna piss off Final Fantasy, man?
Success.
Massive amounts of success. You're gonna piss off Final Fantasy, man? All right, well, he's gonna take Nobuo Uematsu and he's gonna leave, dude. He's gone. It's just all these. There's so many examples of devs that work with Square Enix at one point, and they just get screwed over by something, and they go, okay,
bye.
Well, I made a game that put my name on the map that people really liked, everyone except for you, I guess. So I'm gonna go leave to put my name on something that people will like.
Yeah.
And this isn't Square, but it's another Japanese thing. So that I can build up my wall of reason. Konami doesn't want to release another Suikoden game. All right, hello, entire team of friends who made the old Suikoden games. Let's all leave together and make one on our own. And now they're doing it.
Guess what? People will fund
games.
a Kickstarter for a new Suikoden game instantly.
Exactly, which is exactly what happened.
And now we have two, because
Yes.
they got so much money they could make 2 games.
So I am wondering, because it seems like they're really shooting themselves in the foot here. This is at least the start of them shooting themselves in the foot, because they've had a lot of titles that have come out that people either go, it's all right, or they start like going monkey mode and just poop is on the walls. They're going crazy. Banana peels everywhere. It's, you start bringing up NFTs, and people like Yoshi P and other Final Fantasy guys go, we're not gonna put this in our game. At the end of the day, what that means is that if it's up to the Final Fantasy guys, the NFTs aren't gonna end up in the game. If it's up to the people that own the Final Fantasy guys, and they really want NFTs to be in Final Fantasy, There's a good chance that NFTs are probably going to worm their way in there somehow.
And you know what that's gonna do? They're gonna lose the entire fan base, and they'll go play whatever Yoshi P makes next.
Exactly. They're going to play whatever Yoshi P makes when he leaves and puts out, oh yeah, an indie MMO, this hasn't really like been done before, but my name's Yoshi P and I just need like $1 million and I'm going to make the best game you've ever played. Guess what? $700 million instantly. The entire Earth's population gives $5 and it's just like, oh man, wow, best game ever.
And he says like, and get this, Nobuo Uematsu. What more do you
There you go.
No, you don't need Nobuo Uematsu with Yoshi P. You need Soken. He takes Soken with him. Square Enix is out of composers. They're gone.
That's the other thing is the way, and this is also all the way back to when they were Squaresoft. From what I understand, is that if people ever had complaints about working at OG Square, is that just the way they did things was so like hierarchical and split into like groups of things that these people just like they had their order of business and like. The Dragon Quest and the Saga and the Final Fantasy and all these like the weird side games. Nomura's weird group of goons that just are brainwashed to make whatever he like just says. He just, like plugs his brain in and they're all connected and they like fart out the bouncer or something. It's all like they have their teams that know each other very well. And apart from the hierarchy, it's exactly what's happened already. If Xenogears man doesn't get to make another Xenogears, the composer's going with him. The composer already left, and the composer is going to continue working with him because they're great friends. Sakaguchi doesn't get to make the Final Fantasy games he likes anymore. All right, his best friend Nobuo Uematsu, who he's been working with from the start, gets to go right along with him. If Yoshi P wants to leave,
the
Final
entire
Fantasy 14,
14 development team is gone.
The whole
because like there are so many stories about that. The fact that Yoshi P was such a catalyst for the revival of that game that everyone has high opinions of him. He's gone. Your lead translator, Koji Fox, is gone, who does all the translation work on that and like had worked on many Final Fantasy games before that. They're gone. So you lose the heart and soul of your like operation in the West. You then start losing all the developers who worked with Yoshi P and want to continue working with him. And then you're left with the people that are probably at the bottom and are like, we just need jobs.
Or I haven't been here long enough to develop a relationship.
And that's how you wind up with 343.
All right. That's like that is a truth bomb. I was not expecting that. Like, obviously also it's worth pointing out this is like this is hypothetical. This is the nightmare apocalypse catalyst situation. But it's still like the reason that all this hyperbole is happening and why we're willing to spout so many specifics is because it's happened before in a scarily similar way, just with something different than NFTs. Just reason that team doesn't like what producer want, team leaves. Humanity,
especially because like the people that have worked on Final Fantasy 14 of all things can leave and get a job wherever they want.
Totally. They can make their own company if they wanted to in like a second.
And the thing is too, because I was thinking about this, I didn't want to interrupt your rant, but I was thinking about this during because it was epic. So I wanted you to get it all out. But I was thinking about this, like Final Fantasy 7, and then I was thinking about 14. Right? It's not just like the game that you make dictates its success. There's so many other factors involved. Like another big one is just the current landscape at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but I feel like part of the reason 14 blew up the way that it did was because people who have been playing WoW for such a long time are A, just getting sick of it, and B, all of this stuff was with Blizzard and Activision was happening at the same time, so they wanted to go somewhere else. Oh, here's this other MMO out of nowhere. Like, let's give this a try. And I feel like that was a huge part of its like more recent success, right?
Yeah, the thing with 14's recent success is I would be interested in seeing player numbers of how many people have stuck around from that surge to now. Because like I'm hard pressed to think of any other games that have had so much success in such a concentrated time period that they have had to stop selling the game for 3 months.
Yeah.
Like that is a level of success that is unheard of. And I wonder how much of that is server limitations that Square Enix just didn't believe 14 would do that well, and so didn't set them up super correctly. But I doubt that's it, because the queues have never been a problem before that. So I do wonder.
Square Enix has more than enough servers, but some of their servers are now being taken up to be able to run the blockchain, to be able to make sure that the NFTs stay there and don't go away. Or Final Fantasy 14.
The blockchain servers are eating away.
Another example of this too, right? There was a time, Overwatch is becoming a bit of a joke now, but there was a time when it first came out, perfectly timed. The hero shooter genre was like really starting to take shape, and Blizzard is like, here's a really polished, really just like
polished with a diverse cast and has like really good map design.
It has, and if that had come out near the end of the hero shooter boom and like maybe the battle royale was just starting to take off, it wouldn't have done nearly as well. Would have done well because it's a Blizzard game.
Because like hero shooters that have done that well, we have like Team Fortress and Overwatch. It's basically it.
Yeah.
Maybe Valorant now you can kind of count in that sphere, but Valorant's almost more of like a competitor to CS:GO than it is.
And then there's Paladins. It's off.
Hey, Paladins has been doing its own thing for a while. I'll give that game props.
No, I would, but in terms of
success.
Like, recognizableness. It just which is not a word, but you know what? Whatever.
It is now.
It is now. I'm decreeing it. But yeah, it's so much of a game success is like when you release it, because you gotta.
Now we learned we were all completely incorrect, and what Eidos Montreal really wants to make is a Deus Ex hero shooter. That's the first project.
God. They brought that to Square Enix, and Square Enix actually sold them immediately, and that was that's why the deal happened.
When you know that Square Enix doesn't like your idea, that's how you know you messed up.
Jesus.
Yeah. I think this is such a weird mix to have happened just on a random Monday. We get Square Enix has just sold its Canadian and American development studios. Okay.
All right.
And yeah, the I think the oddball studio here is probably Square Enix Montreal, because Square Enix Montreal is primarily a mobile games developer. They do the Go franchises of like puzzle morphs of the console franchises of Square Enix, which have been relatively well received. But you know, it's. I think they were kind of thrown in. Probably just Square Enix doesn't want to deal with them anymore.
So sad.
I have to wonder if their name changes, because they are Square Enix Montreal. I have to wonder if they stay Square Enix Montreal.
They just become Montreal. They just cut the Square Enix off.
Yeah, and now I think you have an interesting gap here because of some other acquisitions that have happened recently. So we had the ZeniMax Media acquisition from Microsoft. $7.5 billion. That is so many times what we just got. We had the Mojang acquisition in 2014. That was $2.5 billion. Like $300 million for 3 studios of people is bonkers.
Imagine right now, the people at Microsoft in charge of all of these deals looks at what Embracer Group just had to pay for those dudes. They're like, dude, what the hell?
Yeah, exactly.
They look at Square Enix and like, we could have done like at least $1 billion for this.
Why didn't you even ask?
You could have just bought Square Enix.
I mean, there were rumors that Square Enix itself was looking for a sale. I wonder if this is what those were actually about, was specifically looking to sell this amount of these 3 studios. Because like Bungie itself, 3.6 billion for Bungie. Just Bungie. Like, man, the numbers here are wild to me. That this was a thing that Square Enix just let slip for 300. Because if they're disappointed about the performance of these studios, why not sell them for like big bucks? Make a quick $1 billion off of these 3.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's why I think there's got to be some other motive.
It's
Just,
like they're
speed more
desperate
than
to get rid
anything.
of them. So
And the
they're
fact that they
they're
also
low
gave
on-
the IPs with it, like,
Yeah.
I wonder if Embracer Group just put in an offer and didn't expect them to respond to something that low, and they
Yeah.
just
It was
did.
like
They just
It was like
accepted
an
it.
offer. It was like an email they sent out when they were super drunk and like, dude, what would happen? That'd be crazy.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
it went
yeah.
through. They're like, wait, we were kidding.
Let's go. We'll keep it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it's just this is such a bonkers deal to me. I think this is the one to follow now because I think this is the first instance we have a studio's set that is not doing super well right now, getting acquired. So I'm curious as to what this morphs into. If this was more about the IPs than the studios themselves, and the studios get dissolved, which I would hate to see, but I do think that's a possibility, especially with like Tomb Raider and Deus Ex and Thief in that IP catalog.
Mm.
I could see a world where that happens. I also wonder, a little bit of my mind is going, Embracer Group owns the Darksiders devs. You know what's a lot like Darksiders? Legacy of Kain, which is one of the IPs listed as being sold here.
That was one of the things that I wanted to bring up. I feel like Legacy of Kain fans have been starving.
I know.
For a
Yep.
very, very, and it's not a franchise I'm overly familiar with, but I know that you poor souls have been starved for a very, very long time.
It was just one of those like classic third-person action platforming types of games that like kind of morphed into a proper vampire type thing that I think just doesn't exist much today. So
You know,
that
now
could be
that I
the
think
dark
about
horse
it,
of this.
I have played a Legacy of Kain game before.
Yeah.
It's called Nosgoth, and it was that weird.
Oh, the old one.
the it was this like team-based like
Oh,
competitive thing that wasn't even
Oh
officially
my.
released.
yes, I have also
know what?
played that.
That was kind of cool. I'm not even gonna make too much fun of it because it was kind of cool.
Mhm.
But I am sure that is not what Legacy of Kain fans were looking for. I'm just gonna
Probably
throw
not.
that out there.
Yeah. Well, all right. I think we've talked for more than double what we thought this was going to take about this because it turns out there's a lot to say. So yeah, this is going to be out before the podcast is actually coming out this week. It's coming. Don't worry, it'll be there. Yeah, this is our little news pinch of information this week. So hopefully we'll see you for the podcast next time and more news whenever it happens. I'm playing the outro because you got to end on a musical note and not just silence.
But you don't have to start with one.
Yeah, well, it's breaking news. We go right into
We had
it.
a cold open for this one. Yeah, this is yeah. It's important. It's sad. This is get you emotionally invested.
Yep. We're sorry.